What's up, YouTube? Mr. Limesy here, and today I want to break down the Path of Exile 2 announcement video. I know it's like kind of announced, but the big announcement piece with the early access coming in soon and all the pieces of it. It was amazing. It was extremely well done. They blew it out of the water. They put Diablo 4 to shame a little bit in terms of all of the content, all of the preparedness with all the pieces. And that's not to say anything against the devs of D4 there in that regard, but I do think it is extremely obvious that the devs of Path of Exile are way more like passionate about ARPG gaming in a hardcore way. I think that's just it's just very different, right? The styles of the developers there. I feel like, and I've talked with the developers of both teams, honestly, but when I sit down and talk with the developers of Path of Exile 2, when I went to California and chatted with Jonathan Rogers and stuff, they just like, they're just like gamers, or like really gamers, or they're sitting there and they're just excited. They're just telling you about the systems and they're just going on and on and on. There's a Q&A at the end of this video. They did a video, the announcement video, and then they did a Q&A, and it was like 3 hours. It was way too long. But they were just giving all the information of everything because they were just constantly excited and constantly talking about the meetings that were happening and what they were discussing and all the pieces down to the intricate details of the gameplay or the stats or whatever it was. And just decisions that I think are super important when you are designing a game. So, it was a lot. Like I said, it was really long, but it was very informative and you could really see the passion that they had. So I want to give a little breakdown, a little review of the video and all the pieces, right? So Path of Exile 2 is coming. It is going to be early access December 6th. It will be $30 to play in the early access, or you can win a key from some of the streamers or like tweeting out and stuff. They have keys. I don't know where they got keys from. I didn't get any keys. I'm gonna have to go talk to them to get keys. And then additionally, if you spent $480 within Path of Exile 1 on skins and all the different things, then you automatically get a key to go in there. So just that's the first base piece of it, right? Beyond that, it is a little different from what the game will be, right? So for instance, right now there's only 6 classes available. There, I believe, is going to be 12 in total, which is a ton of classes. There's only 2 ascensions available, which is like you can take your character and then you ascend into a specialization. So there's only 2 available for each of those 6 characters, but there's going to be a third for each of them. So ultimately, I believe it's going to be 12 classes and 36 ascensions, which is insane. That is like so many classes and ascensions to have. So yeah, that is the plans, but the current. Additionally, right now it's just going to be not seasons. Act 1, 2, 3, and then you'll do Act 1, 2, 3 over again in Cruel mode, which is just like a harder mode before you go to Endgame. But in the future, they're going to have Act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6, and then Endgame. So they're going to, they just haven't developed Acts 4, 5, and 6 yet. So they're just doubling up for right now. And then the plan is sometime in 2025, they will do the pushover from early access into the actual game. The actual game will be free to play, so it'll go back to that base model of Path of Exile where it's free to play. You probably have to buy some stash tabs, or would like to, I should say, not have to. And then they'll sell all the skins and supporter packs and all the, everything like current Path of Exile is right now. So that's going to be their plan. Again, that's sometime in 2025. But for the early access right now, it is $30 for the key. And you're just kind of going in and testing. And then all your characters in early access will get pushed onto like a special, just like early access previous like league spot whenever they launch the new game. So you'll still have access to them, but they'll probably be broken in many ways and it'll be like messy. I don't know why they're even keeping the characters, but they decided they want to keep them. So a little bit about Path of Exile 2 in comparison to like Path of Exile 1. It is similar. The game definitely has similarities. It is a slower game. They really tried to slow down some of the combat. I've actually played it. I've played through Act 1 and Act 2. And I played earlier builds, right? So not the latest build. But I've played earlier builds and I've played through. And it was definitely slower. It was definitely harder. You have a dodge roll now, and you need it. You are constantly needing to dodge roll away from things and stuff. Monsters, you could be in like the second or third zone and monsters just come over and just like pop you if you are not aware. So it definitely felt like every step of the way you were really having to be like focused because you could die in any of the areas. So slower game, scarier game for sure, at least on, the parts that I played through. They tried to simplify in some ways. So for instance, they tried to simplify the gem system a lot. Gems no longer go into the items that you're wearing. They didn't really like the whole idea of like you would build everything in an item with the slots, but then you couldn't change to a new item until you had the slots. They felt like that was kind of causing issues in Path of Exile. So they removed that and they put it on its own tree. You have now kind of like your skill tree, and you can insert your support gems and your gems over in your tree. They also have recommended gems as well. So just like, hey, when you're this class, you can go click that, and it's like, here's the gems that you can get with this gem right now. Now, you can always go and still mix and match and get any of the gems and do any of the combinations of builds across. And that'll be actually really fun to do. But it is at least nicer now and easier now for the newer player, instead of just coming across gems and being like, what do all these gems do? Can I use all these? So now you don't get a gem that's like, this is, Flame Dash or whatever. You get a gem that is, it's just an uncut skill gem. And then you pick what skill you want it to be. So you go and you find those around the map and stuff as you're doing it. So this is the like active skill tree, not the passive skill tree, which is different. But in this active skill tree, they have it a lot easier to understand and a lot better for the newer player, while still allowing someone to go and like I say, be creative and create all of these crazy things. Now, in terms of the passive skill tree, they saw the passive skill tree in Path of Exile 1, which is right here. And they thought, you know what we need to do to this? We need to make it bigger. And so that's what they did. So the Path of Exile 2 skill tree, and this is the passive skill tree, is now bigger than the Path of Exile 1 skill tree, which I thought was an interesting decision, because they did do the same idea of like, or they tried to simplify and make things easier in so many ways, but they were like, you know what? This is still iconic, whatever it is to our game. So we're going to do this. And it's still very similar, right? You start at a different spot for every class, just like in 1. I mean, it's a little different, but you start at a different spot for every class. And then you kind of work your way out. They still have the, the game-changing nodes that are the ones like, you have 1 life, but you're immune to chaos damage, right? Like, they still have all of those. But then, of course, a lot of them are just plus to damage, plus attack speed. Something they did change is all of the stat nodes in between are now choosable. So rather than in Path of Exile 1, right, like, it's not letting me zoom in on it. That's fine. In Path of Exile 1, you're going to have, maybe this will do it. There we go. Strength nodes, int nodes, dex nodes. In Path of Exile 2, it is just stat node, and when you click it, you get to choose what stat it is. So that is something, they try to make it, I guess, a little easier for stats in that capacity. But they also did something, which I thought, this is one of my favorite things actually in the game. And it was confusing at first within the alpha, but something that I actually really love that they're doing is they have weapon specialization within your passive tree. So what that means is you actually can have two different loadouts of your passive tree, right? So you could literally do an entire build, and then you could have your second loadout where you use your passive skills in a completely different way and do completely different things. And then based on which weapon you're using, based on the, you have your weapons and the different skills that you're using. So when I use this skill, I can assign it to use a bow. When I use this skill, I can assign it to use a wand, right? On my weapon swap or whatever. It will actually swap your entire tree to whatever that item is. And so a really, really interesting way that I think you can allow for a lot of combinations, right? I could have something that is like within my tree, big AoE, trying to grow my AoE as much as possible and tie that to something where I'm like cursing an area. So I get a big AoE and it uses that part of the tree. And then when I go for my attack, it won't have the AoE anymore. I can have it be really on like a high damage piece, whatever it is, right? You can do a lot of stuff. It's an extreme weapon swap, weapon specialization that I think is beautiful. And it allows you to dual wield builds, not just dual wield weapons, right? So you can be a cold sorceress and a fire sorceress in a way, and have one set of the tree be all fire and one set of the tree be all cold. And whichever weapon you use, you can go one way or the other, right? So very cool, right? Very, very cool. Something they also did is you now only get a single support gem of each kind. So originally, you'd always put the same support gems in like all of your gear, right? It was like if you want, lesser projectiles or whatever it is, you just like, you put that in every single piece of gear, right? Whatever it was, like all of the skills have that. Now you get a single time. So if you want added cold damage, you only get one of those. And you have to decide which skill of yours you want to actually put that skill support gem on. So that means there's going to be more support gems, but it also means that you're now going to have, honestly, more decisions to make, because every skill now you're thinking, how do I actually want this skill to be? Is this going to be higher on the cold damage? Is this going to be more generating me life? Is this going to be more of an AoE skill? Whatever it is. So it'll be set for each one's of those. And so I think that was actually a fabulous change as well, and something that, I didn't really think about. So that is kind of the main core stuff, I would say, that's really different for the game in the early and mid and kind of like about the game. And I was very impressed because there's also just all this stuff like skill interaction, right? Now, if I set up a flame wall and then I shoot sparks through the flame wall, the sparks ignite, right? I've talked about this before. If I shoot a frozen orb and then cast Frost Nova, I can actually cast the Frost Nova on the frozen orb as it's traveling where it is. There's a lot of skill interaction. There's a lot of stuff like if you put grenades on the ground, they may take a while to blow up, but if you put burning ground down and then put the grenades on them, they'll blow up instantly. Lots of really cool interaction. And so I love like all of the pieces that they've done with all the skill interaction. I love a lot of this. And I think they are the first modern ARPG that I feel like is really innovating in the space in a bunch of ways, right? Like we've seen cool innovations. Last Epoch, I loved their crafting. I loved the loot filter, and I loved the mana where you could go like a negative in mana. So there were some pieces about that I thought were fantastic. And I thought, oh, those are some great innovations for sure. But they felt like smaller pieces. Whereas Path of Exile 2, I feel like some of these innovations, like the weapon specialization and, how the skills interact and just like how the game plays. And there's so many like bosses throughout the areas now as well. And they've really tried to make a lot of that meaningful. I think it's just like, this is what I felt like when I was waiting for the ARPGs to advance. I felt like this is kind of the next step I was expecting. This is what I was expecting from Diablo 4. This is what I was expecting from just any of these next RPGs, was this next one to come out and be like, look, cool, other games are doing whatever stuff. This is now kind of redefining the genre and pushing it to the next phase. So I think Path of Exile 2 really is going to do that. And I'm very excited for that. Something that I am worried about with the game, and this is something we didn't quite talk about yet, but something I am worried about, is a little bit of the end game. I think it is really exciting, and I think it'll be really fun. So there's actually an entire thing. We're going to kind of go through this together. But it's like, I'm worried because it's so much and it's so confusing. And obviously we just had the highlights kind of. And so it was a lot. We were, drinking from a water hose right there. Potentially as we get it more fed to us simply, it won't be as bad. But when they were talking through the end game and it was this whole piece and all the different pieces of the end game, all I could think was, oh my God, it's already like at that insane level. It's already at that crazy level that Path of Exile 1 kind of feels in some ways, right? And that's kind of the difficulty, and something I know for a lot of people with Path of Exile 1 is they're like, there's so many systems, there's so many things going on, I'm so confused. What am I supposed to do next? And it really hits this idea of like, for some people, they love it because they can just like go crazy deep into it and there's so much. But for a lot of people, they're like, I need a little more guidance. I need a little, there's too many things happening at once. And Path of Exile really built up to that over time. And Path of Exile 2, they say, hey, we're going to keep building on this. It's going to get more and more. But it felt like even starting out, oh my goodness, they really put a lot of things into the end game, which they knew and they did intentionally because they know people want to be in the end game and they wanted to give a lot of options. But I am slightly worried that for many people, it will be too much, right? It could scare them away and be too much because it might throw too much at you. And I think that's something as well that, happens in Path of Exile 1, right? You'll just be playing through and then you'll be getting all of these different currencies and all these just different things. And you have no clue what any of them are supposed to do. And it's not been introduced to you. And it doesn't feel like you can just learn one. It feels like you need to learn all of them because it's just constantly throwing things. And so I would say that would be my biggest fear, is that Path of Exile 2, they're going to overload people too much with it. And, something a lot of people say for Path of Exile is, I feel like I need a PhD in it. I feel like I need to go to school and take classes on these different systems. And the systems are beautiful and super intricate. But yeah, sometimes they're like, oh my God, like there's so many systems. There's so many things to learn. So here's some of the stuff that, we do have with it, right? To start, the end game is an infinite expanding overworld map. So rather than having your map in like you have in Path of Exile that just has your set maps, this is just a large sprawling map, and it has a bunch of little like connections, kind of think of it like any map on a board game or whatever, right? Like a delve in a way. And you travel along it, and there's different maps that you'll do and different events that you'll do as you travel along it. And if you fail them, you'll block off the pathing, and you'll need to find other ways around, and all that, right? So at the center is where you open portals to explore those maps, and you need waystones, and you can modify the stones with currency, making it better or harder. So this is kind of your maps and your map tiers, and modifying them. You kill the rares and uniques. If you die, the map can no longer be run, so that's a difference, right? You don't no longer get 6 chances or whatever within the map, or 5 chances. You get 1 death. You can go in and back and forth through a portal, but if you die, the map closes and that's it. And you go through your end pieces there, right? Then all the endgame systems. They have breach, which is a fissure inside of a map, and they can give breach tablets, which you use in the towers to add more breach encounters to the Atlas overworld, and you can craft on those. They reward you with catalyst and breach rings, which can have better quality, and you can do crafting. Breach splinters, which you collect to create a breach stone, which is used in the realm gates to access the pinnacle boss Zesht. And that's one of the sections. Then there are rituals, which are altars inside of a map, and you have to kill monsters in the radius. And after killing enough, you activate the altar, and then you kill and survive to gain tribute. You can interact with the altar to use tribute to buy powerful items and currency. You can buy omens, and they affect other currency. They drop ritual tablets, which work like breach tablets, but for rituals. There's the pinnacle boss there. There's delirium, which is mirrors inside the map. They reward distilled emotions. You can combine 3 emotions to modify an amulet with an effect from a node from the normal passive tree. You can use distilled emotions to modify waystones. Then there's delirium tablets, simulacrum splinters. There's a pinnacle boss for that too. There's expedition, and these are dig sites with explosives that contain artifacts. And there's remnants. You blow them up, activate their effects. Exchange them for rune magic, of course. You can find expedition tablets. Occasionally you can find logbooks, which are special expeditions. And then there's the pinnacle boss here. And then there's the special pinnacle boss right there. That's like a really fast, just like run through of the pieces. But you can already see there's a billion things. You have your tablets for each of the things. You have your catalysts and your breach stones and your ritual tablets and your distilled emotions. And you're combining 3 of the emotions to modify an amulet. And if you get your breach rings, then those can have 50% quality instead of 20% quality. It's already, like I say, it's already a little worrying because it's like, oh my God, like it's a lot. And it's a lot to remember as well and constantly be thinking. And when you're doing stuff like crafting and you have things like Val orbs and stuff, which are the final piece of crafting, it makes me feel like, hey, you're going to have a really good craft guide because there are many like phases of how you need to craft through, right? First, you want to start with this item. And then you can use these currencies, and there's actually a lot of stuff, right? You can use these currencies to only re-roll the suffixes or only re-roll the prefixes. And that one you'll use at the start here, and then you'll add on these using this currency, using your exalted orbs. And then once you have that, then you'll do this. And then once you've used your emotions, then you're going to val it. And, but if you do it in the wrong order, well, now you've bricked the item, and that's not good here. And, obviously min-maxing is a big deal with Path of Exile. But, I think like there's still a lot of concern for somebody who wants to do well, but gets really confused. Right. So, you don't have to learn all of this at once. You don't have to have all of the knowledge to enjoy the game, to have fun with the game, any of that. But I do think My biggest concern, like I say, is that you will get to the Atlas and you'll start in your overworld map, and then you'll just run into all of these different things, and it won't let you, it's not going to be fed to you in a way where it's like, first we're just doing breaches for a while. Okay, you understand that. Now we're doing rituals for a while, right? Instead, it'll be like you just go in and you're just going to, oh, there's an expedition in this map, there's a breach in that map, there's this and that map, and you're just going to start accumulating all these currencies, and it'll get overwhelming. That is my concern, mostly because I know how Path of Exile 1 is and how it is for people, including myself, who has like 1,000+ hours in Path of Exile 1 and still, for a majority of the systems, is like, I don't know what I'm doing, you know. Then you have all the other pieces, you know, your ascensions. So you have your different trials for your ascensions, and you can pick which ascension you want to do. And there's, you know, choosing your modifiers as you're going through that. And just, you know, Trial of Chaos in the Endgame and more things, right? So for all of the PoE players who have played and are big hardcore players of it, I think to them it makes more sense, and they're like, it's not as bad, right? And I understand that because, like I say, I've played an okay amount. I'm kind of in the middle. I understand the confusion. I also understand that it's not so bad. So, for instance, for me, the it's not so bad is the skill tree. The passive skill tree is not actually that bad, right? Like, it looks like the most daunting thing in the world. But as soon as you actually get into the skill tree and like look through, you're like, oh, okay, this is just like plus to life and mana. This is just attack speed. This is just lifesteal. This is, you know, like when you're actually going through it, you're like, yeah, this actually isn't really bad at all. And you just kind of look at some of the main nodes you want to go for, and you're like, okay, I want to like go for this node. I want to get, you know, I think this is like extra totem or something over here, right? You know, I just want to like get that. And you just kind of do that. Now, getting perfect pathing and stuff is something that, you know, you use a build guide for, or you can go through the path of building and do some stuff there. But for a lot of it, I can blindly go through and have a great time with a character, and it's not bad at all. But when you first come into the game and you see this, you get a skill point and you go, oh, let me put this in. And you open the skill tree and this is what you see. You're like, what? Right? Like it doesn't entice you to learn it and to look into it enough to go, oh, actually, it's not that bad, because it's just a flood. It's too much, right? And that's how the end game is, I think, many times as well. When you actually break down each piece of the end game and you've actually learned it, it's not nearly as bad. But if you first get into it and you just start getting all of these shards and all of these relics and emotions and whatever things, and you haven't learned one and felt comfortable with one system yet, and now you have other systems that you need to learn, it's very scary. So I'll be curious to see how they handle it in Path of Exile 2. Because like I said, they've done a lot of noobification. Is that a word? I don't know. For the game already with like the skills and stuff, right? That was a big change of improving that for newer players. And I think they did a fabulous job with how they did it. So I'm curious to see if in the end game, in the later stages, they really do a lot to just help that out. Otherwise, I think you might start losing, a lot of player base as they get to endgame and just start getting too confused. Now, do I believe all of this is going to make Diablo 4 non-existent and the other modern ARPGs? My answer is no, because I think it is a very different style. I think it's more going to actually destroy Path of Exile 1 than it will destroy Diablo 4. Because I think the people playing Diablo 4, a lot of them will find this game too complicated. And I can see them play it for a little bit and enjoy it. But I think the Diablo 4 audience is more a you know, average, like, chill gamer, right? Like, oh, I've got a couple hours. I'm going to go sit down and play some D4 for a little bit, right? I don't think it has the hardcore group nearly as much. And so I think that's going to keep that audience, or a lot of that audience, and Path of Exile 1 and some other, you know, hardcore gamers will instead move into Path of Exile 2 and be the group playing this group. Yeah, more of a casual audience. I don't think casual is an insult. I think it's just literally, I think it's more of a casual game for more of a casual audience. Yeah. So, you know, I think in terms of the game coming out and what they're releasing with it and the innovations they're making, all of that, I think that Path of Exile 2 has like buried Diablo 4. Maybe that should be the title of the video. Diablo 4 Buried by PoE 2. Buried it in terms of just like showing off and showing like, look, we can do so much better in these systems, and creating a game that, you know, has like way more stuff to it. But I think the audience is still going to be in that capacity, and you'll still have your separate audiences. Graphically, I think it's also a better game than D4. I mean, I think D2R looks better than Diablo 4 though as well. I think the spells in Diablo 4 especially are not a good look. They don't mix with the environment very well at all. It's a weird combination. So I actually thought Path of Exile 2's graphics were very nice when I played through it. I really enjoyed it. And then they had even cool things like the moving town in Act 2 is like super fun and interesting. But, you know, I mean, there's more to see. The big questions are still like, will Path of Exile 2 turn into Endgame, Path of Exile 1, entire screen blows up in a second? It seems like they're trying to avoid that. But there were flashes where it was kind of spammy, right? There were some flashes when they were showing through their video of a little bit of stuff that was a little bit spammy. And so I think it'll halfway get there. I think it'll get to the point where it is still a lot, but maybe not quite as much as PoE1. But we're also at the start of the game, and they're going to be doing leagues as well, right? It'll probably be the same thing every 2 months, right? You'll probably get like 2 months Path of Exile 1, the next 2 months Path of Exile 2, the next 2 months Path of Exile 1, and they'll probably alternate like that. Or wait, Path of Exile 1's every 3 months, right? So maybe they'll do it every month and a half. So I expect it's going to be PoE 2 people, you know, Path of Exile people will just bounce back and forth between 1 and 2 a lot of times, and we'll see. But most leagues closer to 4 months lately. Okay. So maybe it will be down to 4, and it'll just be every 2 months alternating roughly. They're going to try and keep them separate so people can play them both. But yeah, that's kind of my Path of Exile 2 review, all the pieces, breakdown of their video. I thought they did a really great job. You can see the passion, you can see the advancing of the technology, of the game, of the genre. It's very impressive. I have my minor concerns, but I'm excited to get in there and play further through. I think, you know, I had a lot of fun playing like the different bosses. The co-op mode was fantastic. I think that'll be a really big hit. It was really a lot of fun to co-op through. And yeah. So with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe, YouTube. Peace, everybody.